What if I told you a tiny island in Iceland once fought a volcano with seawater? Not fiction, not myth. This actually happened. For 160 straight days, engineers, firefighters, and volunteers pumped over 1 billion gallons of salt water onto flowing lava to stop it from swallowing a town. The world watched in awe. Scientists were stunned, and somehow it worked. From the edge of disaster, a daring plan changed everything. Welcome to Heimaey, where salt, steam, and human grit held back nature's fury. This isn't just about lava, it's about what happens when humans refuse to give up. The day fire and water collided. It was just past 2 Heimaey on January 23, 1973, when the earth split open beneath Heimaey Island, off the southern coast of Iceland. Residents woke to a nightmare. A massive fissure had torn through the ground, only 650 feet from the town. Lava fountains shot into the sky, some soaring nearly 500 feet high. The glow lit up the night as if a second sun had risen, and this one meant destruction. At first, people thought it might pass. Iceland is used to tremors, but by morning it was clear. This wasn't a minor eruption. It was the start of a disaster. Lava poured from the fissure, racing toward homes, infrastructure, and the island's precious harbor. The entire town of 5,300 people had no choice but to run. Fishing boats that had been docked due to a recent storm became their lifeline. Within 6 hours, the island was almost entirely evacuated. As the lava advanced, homes began to vanish, consumed in slow motion. Streets cracked and melted. What was once a peaceful harbor town now looked like a war zone. But even with the panic, something remarkable happened. Not a single resident died in those first critical hours. The people moved fast, coordinated, and with courage. As one evacuee later said, "We had to trust the sea to save us from the fire." The volcano, now known as Eldfell, wasn't done. It had only just begun what would become a 5-month siege on the island. And while most people were safe on the mainland, the island itself would face a daily battle for survival, one that would push human limits and rewrite the rules of disaster response. As the island emptied and lava filled its streets, those left behind faced a haunting question. Was there anything they could do to stop the destruction? What followed wasn't just an act of survival. It was a plan so daring and strange that most scientists said it would never work. But desperate times call for extraordinary ideas. A town at the edge of destruction. As the days turned into weeks, Heimaey Island looked more like a battlefield than a fishing town. Lava flowed through neighborhoods, burying homes under glowing rivers of rock and waves of ash. Up to 16 feet of tephra, volcanic ash and debris, covered parts of the town. Around 300 buildings were destroyed, yet a handful of people stayed behind, risking their lives to save what was left. These volunteers, firefighters, engineers, and residents boarded up windows, cleared ash off rooftops, and worked tirelessly to protect buildings that hadn't yet been claimed by the volcano. Their work wasn't just about property, it was about identity, history, and hope. One firefighter described it best. "We couldn't let the lava take everything. We had to fight for what we could still save." The real danger, however, wasn't the homes, it was the harbor. The lava was crawling toward it, threatening to seal off the island's only major economic lifeline. If the harbor was lost, so was the town's future. Fishing made up nearly 3% of Iceland's GDP, and Heimaey was a key player in that industry. Without the harbor, the island might be uninhabitable. Engineers and officials realized the situation was growing desperate. They needed a plan, and fast. Conventional methods wouldn't be enough. Stopping lava is not like putting out a fire. It doesn't freeze or fade. It crushes, consumes, and keeps moving. That's when the idea emerged, an idea that sounded impossible at first, but was too bold to ignore. With time running out and the harbor under threat, a wild idea began to take shape. What if you could cool the lava down before it got there? What if the answer wasn't more firepower, but water? It was a gamble, but Iceland is no stranger to using nature against itself. And so a radical experiment began. Fight lava with seawater. The idea to fight lava with seawater started with Icelandic physicist Thorbjørn Sigurgeirsson. His theory was simple but daring. Spray enough cold seawater onto lava, and it would harden, slowly building a wall of solid rock that could stop or redirect the flow. No one had ever tried it on this scale, but with the harbor at stake, there was nothing to lose. Just 15 days after the eruption began, firefighters started. The first phase of the experiment. They used high-pressure hoses to spray seawater onto the lava's leading edge. The moment the water hit the molten surface, it vaporized into thick clouds of steam. The lava hissed and cracked, but it slowed. It wasn't much, but it was something. That early success gave birth to a much bigger operation. More pumps were brought in, and teams began working around the clock to expand the effort. The islanders were now engaged in one of the most ambitious disaster responses ever attempted, redirecting a volcano. "We were using garden tools against a giant," one worker later said, but the giant blinked. Engineers knew they needed more power, more reach, and more coordination. The challenge wasn't just lava, it was terrain, heat, and time. Lava flows don't wait, they don't negotiate. But if enough seawater could be sprayed fast enough, it might just be possible to build a wall strong enough to hold nature back. And so, the next phase of the plan began. Those hoses were just the beginning. What Heimaey needed next wasn't just people, it needed machines. It needed scale. And on March 1st, help arrived not in the form of another truck, but a ship. Its name was Sandy. And from the sea, it would lead the charge in what became the largest lava-cooling mission in history. Sandy the ship and the first turning point. On March 1st, the island got its first serious backup. The dredging ship Sandy arrived in the harbor and immediately began pumping seawater straight onto the advancing lava. Unlike the fire hoses, Sandy could deliver large volumes of water consistently and, crucially, from offshore. This was the first real turning point in the fight to save Heimaey. With Sandy in place, lava that was threatening to cut off the harbor was finally slowed down. The seawater cooled the front edge just enough to buy engineers more time. On land, fire trucks, port vessels, and volunteer crews joined the effort, using every available hose and pump. The operation became a chaotic symphony of steam, shovels, and grit. Still, it wasn't enough. The lava's edge had grown steep, too high and too hot for hoses to reach it directly. Workers couldn't get close enough, and the cooled areas began to crack under pressure. The team knew they needed more power and precision if they wanted to stand a chance at truly controlling the lava's path. That's when they came up with a daring plan: stretch a network of seawater pipes directly across the lava field. It sounded impossible, but they had an insight. Plastic pipes filled with water could survive the heat. "If we couldn't go around the lava, we had to go through it," one engineer said. The groundwork was being laid, literally, for a new phase in this battle. With Sandy slowing the lava and pipes being dragged across hellish ground, the people of Heimaey were proving something remarkable. You could push back against nature. But this was just the prelude. Now came the heavy artillery, machines flown in from across the world to fight fire with water, engineering with urgency, and lava with sheer will. Engineering the impossible. Then came the cavalry, 32 high-capacity pumps flown in from the United States. Each could blast 264 gallons of seawater per second. When these machines roared to life, the battlefield changed. Lava that once rolled freely now faced jets of icy resistance. The ground began to harden. Walls of rock formed, holding back the tide inch by inch. On the surface, it looked like chaos. Bulldozers rumbled across still hot lava fields, clearing paths so workers could lay pipes closer to the front. One misstep could send them into molten rock, but the bulldozers pressed on. Engineers discovered that water-filled plastic pipes didn't melt, giving them the flexibility to expand the network further across the unstable terrain. Within weeks, the cooling network stretched more than 650 feet across the lava's advance. Steam clouds covered the area, making visibility nearly impossible. Workers wore makeshift gear to withstand the intense heat and fumes. It was like working inside a boiling teapot, one technician recalled. But the strategy was working. The lava was slowing, hardening, and piling on itself. The cooled sections formed natural barriers, thickening over time. Bulldozers built embankments behind these walls, reinforcing the defense. What started as a desperate gamble was becoming one of the most impressive emergency engineering feats ever attempted. Heimaey was no longer just surviving, it was beginning to win. And just as the machines hit their stride, the volcano gave the island one final twist: salt. Not fire, not ash, but salt. The seawater that boiled away didn't just leave steam in its wake. It left behind a white legacy, one that would transform the lava. Fields and give Heimaey an otherworldly look few could have expected. The salt legacy. As millions of gallons of seawater blasted across the lava fields, something strange started to happen. The water would boil on contact, vaporizing into giant clouds of steam, but it didn't disappear completely. It left something behind: salt. Tons of it. Over 220,000 tons, to be exact, crusted across the cooled lava like a thick white snow. At first, it was just a curiosity. Then scientists realized the salt wasn't just cosmetic. It was influencing the way the lava cooled. The white crust helped insulate parts of the hardened lava, changing its color and texture. In place, it turned jet-black volcanic rock into a pale, flaky surface, unlike anything seen before. The salted lava fields, as they came to be called, were soon studied by geologists from around the world. The phenomenon was dubbed hydrothermal crusting, a completely new category of volcanic aftermath. The mix of fire, seawater, and salt had created a natural experiment that no one had planned, but everyone wanted to understand. For the residents of Heimaey, these salt-covered rocks became a strange kind of monument, a testament to what they had done and what they had survived. The salt reminded us that we fought back, one local said. Over time, the fields became a tourist draw. People came from across Europe to walk on the cooled, crusted remains of a volcano that had nearly erased a town. Salted, scarred, and still standing, Heimaey had turned the tide. But the job wasn't done yet. The lava hadn't just been stopped. It had been redirected, reshaped, and even used. Now came the most unbelievable part of the story. The town that nearly vanished wasn't just rebuilding. It was building on the lava itself, creating the lava wall. As the cooling operation ramped up, the mission shifted from reaction to resistance. It was no longer about slowing the lava, it was about stopping it. Spray after spray, gallon after gallon, a fortress began to rise. Over 129,000 square feet of lava front was hardened by water, forming walls dense enough to stop molten rock in its tracks. The method was simple but powerful. As seawater blasted the lava, it cooled rapidly, solidifying the front into thick, jagged rock. With each pass, another layer formed, like armor. These hardened layers started to act as natural barricades. Engineers and crews worked relentlessly, reinforcing these cooling points with bulldozed embankments behind them, turning soft lava into stone fortifications. The battlefield, however, was nearly impossible to navigate. Steam clouds reduced visibility to near zero. Workers often operated blind, relying on the sounds of boiling water and the feel of shifting ground beneath their boots. There were moments I thought we were breathing clouds, one crew member recalled. Yet despite the chaos, no one backed down. And then it happened. By mid-May, the lava front, once inching closer to the harbor every hour, stopped. The relentless river of fire, 5 months strong, came to a halt just before it could seal off the lifeblood of the island. The impossible had been achieved. Heimaey had held back a volcano, not with magic, but with machines, bravery, and boiling seawater. But even victories come with a price. Behind the success of the lava wall were hidden costs: financial, physical, and emotional. The people who stayed behind paid dearly for their defense. Now it was time to count the toll. In broken machinery, in long nights of labor, and in the quiet burns no one ever saw. The real cost was coming to light. The price of the battle. The operation to cool and stop the lava didn't come cheap. In 1973, the effort cost $1.4 million, over $9 million in today's money. For a country as small as Iceland, this was a massive financial gamble. But when weighed against losing the harbor and the town, the price seemed more than worth it. After all, you can rebuild with money. You can't replace a way of life. Even so, the effort wasn't without setbacks. Many of the 32 pumps shipped in from the US weren't made for lava work. Designed to move oil, not seawater, their shafts often broke under the strain. Sometimes they ran dry, overheating in the process. Repairs were constant, and spare parts had to be shipped in quickly from Reykjavik. "We didn't stop for breakdowns," one technician said. "We just fixed them and kept going." Then there were the human costs. Workers endured blistering heat, choking steam, and toxic fumes. Some suffered burns from steam blasts, others struggled with smoke inhalation. They worked in shifts around the clock, on terrain that shifted under their boots. Miraculously, despite all these dangers, not a single life was lost among the volunteers and responders. It was one of the few miracles in a year of disaster, and yet the emotional toll lingered. People had watched their homes buried, their streets vanish under ash, and their memories swallowed by fire. But through that loss came something else, resolve, the kind that doesn't show up on a balance sheet but fuels every shovel, every bolt, every hose. They had paid the price, but they had earned a future. Out of the ashes and the steam, something unexpected began to rise. Not just homes and streets, but opportunity. Beneath the cooled lava, something was stirring, something warm, in fact, something hot. Scientists were about to discover that this catastrophe hadn't just destroyed, it had given something back. A strange, molten gift that would heat the island for years to come. The lava that kept on giving. When the eruption ended in July 1973, many assumed the story was over. But beneath the black rock and white salt, something remarkable remained. Heat. The inside of the lava flows still glowed, holding temperatures of hundreds of degrees, trapped like embers inside a fireplace. Icelandic scientists saw an opportunity. What if this heat could be harvested? By 1974, experiments began. Pipes were inserted into the cooling lava flows to test how much geothermal energy could be extracted. The results were better than expected. The lava, insulated by tephra and ash, acted like a giant underground furnace. A few homes were connected to experimental systems that year, and it worked. Hot water flowed, warmed by the very lava that once threatened their lives. Soon, the town began installing geothermal pipes across more neighborhoods. By 1975, a majority of Heimaey's residents had heating and hot water from the cooled lava flows. For a town that had nearly vanished, this was nothing short of a miracle. The lava that tried to destroy us, one local said, is now heating our homes. And the innovation didn't stop there. Scientists from around the world came to study the site. It became a case study in post-disaster adaptation, a living example of how destruction can turn into development. What was once a battlefield became infrastructure. The lava didn't just stop, it started something entirely new. From disaster to energy, Heimaey was not just recovering, it was evolving. But the lava had done more than heat homes. It had changed the island's shape, its streets, and its foundation. Now the people of Heimaey would take the next step, building not just on the memories of what was lost, but literally on the hardened lava itself. Building on ashes. When the lava cooled, it didn't just leave behind destruction, it left behind land. Heimaey had grown by nearly 20%. That growth wasn't symbolic. It was physical, solid, and ready to be used. And that's exactly what the residents did. They began to rebuild, on the ashes, on the cooled lava, on the very land that tried to bury them. First came infrastructure. Bulldozers cleared the streets, and engineers carved new paths through the black rock. The ash, once a nightmare, became a resource. It was used to extend the island's airport runways and to raise new foundations for homes. What had once smothered the town was now forming its next chapter. The harbor, once the island's lifeline and main target of the lava, came out of the disaster better than before. Ironically, the cooled lava formed a natural breakwater, shielding the harbor from future storms. Fishing companies returned faster than expected. By 1975, they were already matching their pre-eruption output. The sea was still providing, and the island's economy was breathing again. Families returned, schools reopened, and new homes were built. Not just anywhere, but right on top of the hardened lava flows. "We had no choice," one islander explained. "The lava took our land, and then gave us new land to build on. Heimaey didn't just survive, it grew, wiser, stronger, and more united than ever. What happened on Heimaey wasn't just a story of survival, it was a playbook. Around the world, eyes were now fixed on this small Icelandic island. The battle against the volcano had become a model. As scientists and engineers studied every inch of the lava, one question echoed louder than the eruption itself. What if the world could learn from this? Lessons for the world. The Heimaey eruption became one of the most studied volcanic events in history, not because of how big it was, but because of how people responded. For the first time, a town didn't just run from lava, it fought it. That fact alone reshaped how countries thought about volcanic emergencies, especially those with vulnerable coastlines and ports. Iceland's daring gamble, cooling lava with seawater, was once thought absurd. After 1973, it became a case study. Nations like Japan, Italy, and Indonesia began analyzing the techniques used on Heimaey. Engineers across the globe debated new strategies for defending ports and cities from slow-moving lava. It changed everything, said Dr. Arne Sigurdsson, an Icelandic volcanologist. We proved nature can be managed, if not controlled. But the event sparked something deeper too. It raised ethical and practical questions. Should people try to stop a natural force? Or should they retreat and adapt? On Heimaey, they chose to fight, and they won. That decision, powered by courage and science, offered new hope for communities living in the shadow of volcanoes. Even decades later, Heimaey's story continues to be taught in geology classes and emergency response training. It's no longer just a chapter in Iceland's history, it's part of a global conversation about how we live with nature's most powerful forces. The world was watching, and not just scientists. From newspapers to photojournalists, the Heimaey eruption turned into an international sensation. What started as a quiet fishing island became the center of world attention. And the pictures, those steaming walls of lava, the white salt crusts, the burning skies, told a story far beyond words. It was time for Heimaey to take the spotlight. The world watched. For 5 months in 1973, the world couldn't look away from Heimaey. The eruption dominated headlines across Europe and North America. Images of smoke-spewing craters and salt-encrusted lava made front pages and magazine covers. National Geographic ran an iconic feature, turning the island's nightmare into a stunning visual story of survival. The eruption didn't just compete with news, it outshined it. In the middle of Vietnam War peace talks and Cold War tensions, this little island of 5,000 people was making history. Not through politics or war, but through resilience, innovation, and sheer willpower. It looked like the end of the world, one American journalist wrote, and somehow it wasn't. Tourists began arriving soon after the eruption stopped. They wanted to see the salted lava fields, the rebuilt town, the volcano that nearly won. Scientists, too, from all over the globe, made pilgrimages to study the cooled flows in the still steaming rocks. Heimaey had gone from unknown to unforgettable. And for the people who lived through it, that attention meant something. It wasn't fame they wanted, it was acknowledgement. They had fought back, together. And the world was watching not just because of the volcano, but because of the people who stood against it. The tourists left, the scientists returned home, but the people of Heimaey stayed. They lived with the scars, the stories, and the silent mountain at the edge of their town. And in those quiet days that followed, one truth settled in. This wasn't just the end of a crisis, it was the start of a new relationship with the Earth itself. A new chapter in human versus Earth. Heimaey got lucky in some ways. The lava flowed slowly, the harbor was nearby, the ocean offered water. But luck wasn't the full story. What really saved the town was people. Volunteers, engineers, bulldozer drivers, firefighters. They didn't run. They stayed. They sprayed. They fought. And in doing so, they wrote a new chapter in how humans face the fury of the earth. This wasn't just a reaction to a natural disaster. It was an intervention. It showed that with science, speed, and heart, even something as unstoppable as lava could be redirected. The volcano wasn't conquered, but it was challenged. And for the first time, people had the upper hand. Today, the Elfell volcano still stands on Heimaey, quiet, dormant, but not forgotten. It remains a symbol not just of fear, but of what's possible when communities unite. What once threatened to erase a town ended up transforming it into a global symbol of resilience. As one local man put it, "We didn't defeat the volcano, but we told it we weren't going anywhere." In that fight, Heimaey didn't just survive, it changed the way the world sees natural disasters. And maybe, just maybe, it gave us all a little more courage to face what's coming next. Heimaey didn't just survive the eruption, it rewrote the rulebook. Lava became roads, ash became runways, and the volcano that threatened everything now heats homes. The world called it madness until it became a model. What happened in 1973 wasn't just a battle between fire and water, it was a story of resilience, innovation, and the human will to fight back. Today, Heimaey stands stronger, smarter, and prouder, living proof that with courage and creativity, even a volcano can be slowed. So next time nature roars, remember the island that poured 1 billion gallons of seawater and said, "Not today."